Does anyone remember that really weird killer clown trend that happened way back in 2016, where people were posting videos of themselves seeing people dressed up in these horrible costumes and knocking on windows and chasing people? Well, at first I thought it was just some weird new promotional material for a new movie, for that It movie or something that was coming out at the time. I assumed it was some kind of viral campaign and that everyone involved was just an actor. That was until I had an experience with them myself. I was 16 years old at the time, and I was just hanging around with my friend, who I will call Henry. It was getting pretty dark outside, and we were headed down to the local park to drink the rest of the booze that Henry had smuggled out of his house that was long forgotten about by his parents. We were originally just wandering the streets, but some shop owner started screaming at us earlier in the day and threatened to call the cops, so we thought this would be a much more secluded spot where we would get no trouble. No one really used the park, even during the daytime really, because it was just a mess. There was trash and needles scattered everywhere, and it was just piled up with shit. So parents did not let their kids anywhere near the place. The city really did not care enough to clean the place up, so it was basically a breeding ground for hobos at that point. Anyway, we got there, and we were sitting on that thing that you can spin around in a circle on while holding onto. I always forget the name of it. We both thought that we were super cool and really adult, taking turns and passing the bottle so that we could have these huge swigs of the most disgusting red wine I'd ever tasted in my life, to the point where I was gagging after every drink. That shit was not only strong, but was really sour and tangy too, and every sip had me making a silly face, which Henry thought was hilarious. At some point, Henry got up and thought it would be hilarious to spin me around and around, and even though I was begging him to stop, he said he wouldn't unless I surrendered, but when I told him I did, he just ignored me and kept on going. I was getting super dizzy, and I was pretty close to vomiting, but it was around this time that I heard some kind of commotion. The street was pretty empty at that time, aside from a cramped street almost full up with cars parked up on the pavement on either side. All in quick succession, we saw a convoy of cars go past, maybe 4 of them in total, and they were all black and with tinted windows. It seemed so odd and out of place, especially for a pretty poor neighborhood like we lived in. They looked too expensive to be normal. Anyway, not long after Henry had given up spinning me, and I was on my hands and knees trying to hold back the vomit so that I did not look like a little baby, I heard what sounded like tires skidding pretty aggressively on some asphalt a short distance away. Then I heard a few car doors slam shut, followed by heavy footsteps on gravel. I think maybe I heard some whispering too, but I'm not fully sure on that part. It was just silence for a little while after, and Henry and I went back to taking swigs, in between talking about stupid high school shit and which girls we had the biggest crushes on. Fast forward maybe 10 minutes, and while I was telling Henry about how I got so close to kissing this girl named Alice that I really liked, and all of the shit that she said to me, I watched his face transform from a smile and being intently listening to a look of shocked horror. Henry literally grabbed my face and covered my mouth and used his hands to forcefully spin my head around. The street was not super well lit up, so I tried to say, "What is wrong with you? I can't..." But he shushed me pretty aggressively and stopped me again. Then he just pointed into the distance, into the darkness. In the distance, half peeking out of an alley and very clearly looking in our direction, I saw a man standing right there. Only, it wasn't just a regular man or a hobo or anything like that. I mean, that would have creeped me out as well, but the man was wearing some kind of clown getup. Now, let me make this clear. This was not some shitty Halloween knockoff shit that you could buy from the dollar store made of plastic. I know this both from seeing it at this point and also from the multiple looks that I got later. But the outfit was full on makeup and prosthetics. It must have taken hours in a chair because it looked like professional makeup done for a movie. Like the size of the man's nose had been changed and sculpted to look larger and more inhuman, and it was then painted with a splotch of red on the end. There were all kinds of warts and other blemishes that had been added to the face to make it look more visceral. The costume looked like this retro vintage clown costume you might expect to see someone wear in like the 1950s or something. I don't know how to explain it, but just the material and the texture. The actual costume did not look modern and looked very aged. After a few seconds of just being caught in a state of shock, I noticed something else. This man was wearing gloves, surgical gloves, like the kind of shit that a police officer would wear to handle evidence at a crime scene. The shoes the man was wearing as well, they were not those stereotypical, impractical clown shoes that are super long. That was the only part of the costume that did not add up and fit in with everything else. He was wearing black running shoes, but there was something around them. It was some kind of plastic that was completely covering the sole of the shoe and some of the fabric on them too. I asked Henry what the hell we should do because I was stumped. We were just frozen on the spot, and it was not long before that clown started moving towards us, just walking casually. I looked back at him. He gave me a short wave, and then he started walking, like he had all the time in the world. Henry and I got up, and we started walking too. I could hear this click-clack sound coming from behind me every so often. I knew that the sound was coming from the man, but I did not know what was causing it. I didn't want to look behind me. I was way too scared, but I needed to check how far away the man was. He was closer than I expected. He was just a short dash away from touching distance, and when I looked around, he lunged for me. I had no idea how he managed to sneak up on us so quickly and quietly at the same time. He managed to grab onto my wrist, and he was clinging onto me pretty tightly, but Henry was doing his best to help me fight back. For some reason, instead of hitting the man while he was preoccupied, Henry decided that the best course of action was to grab onto my wrist as well and help me pull. I was pulling and trying to head onto the street that was right behind me, but after a while, my wrist hurt and I could not keep up the pressure. The man yanked me and used his leverage in order to push me in the opposite direction. I fell down to my knees just a short distance away from that clown, and I ended up scraping them a little, and Henry managed to just dodge past the man, and he helped me up to my feet. The man did not try to grab Henry while he was running to me. He seemed fine with letting us run in that direction. He didn't try and block him or stop him. We just started running directly in front of us down that street. The man did not even start running after us. He just walked at a slow pace. I heard some kind of a noise coming from behind me. It was some kind of beep sound. And then I heard it coming from in front of me after, somewhere to my right, down a side street. I heard someone say something, and then just silence. When we ran past that side street, there was another one of them. I have no idea how. The second that he saw us, he just started sprinting right behind us, and he was damn fast too. I looked back just once, and I saw that he had pulled out a damn radio while chasing us. It kept happening. I don't know how, but one would chase us for a while, and then another one would appear from around a corner or an alley and scare us half to death and chase us a different direction. I know it sounds stupid and like something out of a shitty movie, but we just weren't thinking, and we were a little bit buzzed from the wine, so it did not click for me where we were going. We eventually ended up down this narrow street that backed up against some local woods. There was one of these clowns walking casually behind us, making no effort to try and grab us. And as we were running, we eventually saw another one right at the end. There was only one other route we could take that was a right turn right in the middle of the street. But after another minute or so of running, I heard tires screeching again, and this blacked out van ended up pulling up and blocking that very road. I am not kidding when I say multiple guys piled out of this thing, all wearing very similar getups and what must have been pounds of makeup. Henry grabbed me by the shoulder and pulled me towards the woods. I kept tripping and stumbling, and I eventually just ducked into a bush and told Henry to keep on going, that I could not run anymore. My legs hurt way too much. He sat there next to me for a while and told me he was not going anywhere. And every so often, we could hear beeps and chatter coming from a radio. Henry was like grabbing onto me with both hands. He basically had me in a bear hug, and he kept squeezing me every time we heard a sound. Then my life flashed right before my eyes when I saw one of them walking towards us. He had this flashlight in his hands that lit up half the damn woods, and he ended up stumbling into us and then calling for more help. He pulled me out of the bush first and grabbed me by my collar and started dragging me across the grass and half lifting me up. I tried to swipe at his face. I couldn't punch him. My arm was slightly caught at a weird angle, and I could not get enough momentum to form a fist and then do any damage, so I started trying to grab at and scratch the man's face. You should have seen the confusion on my face when I grabbed at this man's chin, and half of his face just ripped off and revealed a completely different one underneath. I thought I had drank way too much, but it was obviously the pounds of makeup. I was smacked across the face and ended up being dragged backwards by my feet all the way to the van that pulled up on the road. I had friction burn all over my arms and chest, and it hurt so badly. I saw another one of those clowns lifting Henry up over his shoulders and just carrying him. And before long, we ended up in the back of that van with those clowns. We were both trying to fight back every single step of the way, but there were too many of them, and I could not even keep my balance anymore, half out of fear and half because of the alcohol. The back of that van looked like everything had been stripped out of it. There was not even a dividing section between the back and the front anymore, and it looked as if the original seats had been ripped out and that smaller ones had been fitted in. There was this light in there, this big, blinding spotlight kind of thing, and it hurt to look anywhere in the van when it turned on. I can't remember how many of them there were in there. Maybe 4, maybe 5, maybe more. I lost count pretty quickly. It was not really what I was worrying about anymore. Let's just say that there were more than enough that we were frightened out of our minds, and I did not think that we were going to get out of this situation. I was being held in a vice grip by my throat while seated on the floor, and the rest of them grabbed Henry. They had this thing in the middle of the van, this table, but it was vertical, so anyone strapped to it would have been in a standing position but lifted up off of the ground. It had these thick leather straps on it, and one of the clowns kept punching Henry in the stomach until he would finally stop squirming enough for them to be able to restrain him properly. They had this metal table in there just nearby, but it was sliding back and forth every time we hit a pothole, and when it did this, more utensils and other metal things would clang and fall off. I had no idea where we were being driven to. They did something to Henry, but I'm not really sure what they did. I spent most of that time with my eyes closed while listening to him sob and plead with me, begging me to do something and help him. I wish I could have done something. If I could have done, I would have done it instantly, just to stop whatever they were doing, even if it got me killed. I really did not want to see Henry like that. I saw one of them pick up a scalpel and approach him. They made some kind of incision in the top of his shoulder. None of the clowns talked all that much. Mostly they just kept silent and would just make physical gestures to communicate with each other, I guess to hide their voices from us so that they could not be identified. But I heard the one with the scalpel complain that it was too hot and that it was hard to see. But I saw the clown dig the scalpel in. I remember Henry shouting about how it felt so cold. and I saw the clown scrape something up deep out of his shoulder. Something white in color, and then he put it into some kind of plastic dish. I saw him grab something as big as a pellet, and then he started pushing it into the wound deeper and deeper. Henry was crying out in agony at this point, and I closed my eyes tight, and I could not watch anymore. I remember them saying that he was ready and to move to the next location, and not long after, they were trying to drag me over to that table too. Henry was passed out on the floor, and he was so sweaty that his hair looked like it had been dipped into the ocean. He had a cut running across the entire span of his shoulders, and then he had these marks drawn across different parts of his body in marker. Just these little X's, and then little scribbles that must have been handwriting or something, but it was too blocky and smudged for me to be able to make out what it said. I kicked and I screamed and I fought as hard as I could, and eventually, I guess they decided not to move me. I explicitly recall one of them breaking the silence and saying, "Fuck it," and putting pressure behind my knees and forcing me back down to the ground to a kneeling position. I wanted to just close my eyes and not think anymore, but I couldn't. I kept turning my head to watch what they were doing, and they would keep trying to force my head back looking straight ahead. They made a cut into me, into my shoulder too, and then they put this thing into me. It was small and black, and it had this diamond shape almost, but thinner, almost like a stretched bead shape. They used some kind of tool and kept pushing it deeper and deeper into my wound to the point that it burned, and then they sealed that wound back up. They did this on both shoulders and in other parts of my body too, and then they made me swallow a pill. I don't know what it was, but one of them grabbed my mouth and wrenched it open. I tried to bite down, but all I got was the taste of those plastic gloves, and I guess he didn't even care. Then one of them took the pill and practically had his entire arm shoved down my throat just to ensure that I had to swallow it. I don't really know what happened after that. I could feel my body reacting to something. Every so often, I would feel this spasm in my arm or my leg, and I would jerk and kick out without even meaning to. There was some feeling in my chest spreading outwards and up into my arms and eventually into my fingers. It was some kind of static feeling until I felt my fingers almost pulsing like they had their own heartbeat. We kept on hitting potholes, and I was still trying to use my weight to catch them off guard. I guess since they had stopped doing whatever they were doing, they had eased up just a little bit, and this gave me a chance. I kept pushing and fighting, and at the same time that I tried to force all of my weight into the men holding me, we hit a pothole at speed, and the men stumbled in the direction of the doors. Well, I guess one of those idiots forgot to lock them, because I felt myself being winded as I landed on top of this man on the asphalt. I got up and I ran. The man that I landed on hit the concrete with the back of his head, and he was just slurring his words, and I just fucking ran. I did not want to leave Henry, but I knew that I had to run and try and get help, or we would both be screwed. But as I was running, I kept feeling this twitching feeling in my neck. I would be mid-stride, and my whole body would tense up and spasm when I felt this feeling, and I could feel something in that area almost vibrating is what it felt like, that there was something there just vibrating again and again. I could feel something physical inside my body causing this sensation and pressing right up against my skin, but when I ran my fingers over the area and pushed down, I could not feel anything there. And then about halfway down the street, I realized that the clowns had not gotten out of the vehicle to run after me. The van had stopped and parked up on the side, but no one was moving. I was tired, but I was pushing myself to just keep going. And then boom, I just felt this massive shockwave type feeling in my neck, and then traveling right down my body. It's weird because I obviously felt the shock of it, and all of my muscles tensed up and stopped responding to me. But after that, I did not feel anything. I just felt numb. I ended up lying on the ground. I should have been freezing, but I did not feel hot or cold. I could not move my head, and I was just watching my foot occasionally twitch and move without me telling it to. I remember after, I'm not sure how long, seeing my vision moving, like I was being dragged backwards, but I could not feel anything. My eyes were still looking, but I was not really seeing anything at all. I wasn't really processing any of the information. My vision never went black, and I never woke up anywhere else, but 1 second I was looking up at the night sky, and the next second I was looking up directly at the sun, and my eyes were stinging. There was no transition at all between the night sky and the sun. There was no blink and you miss it. It was literally just one frame was different to the other while my eyes were still open. I stumbled all the way home as best as I possibly could, even though my legs felt wobbly and ached really, really badly. My parents were furious with me, and when they asked me where I was, I just told them that I got drunk at the park and forgot about the time. I think they were kinda shocked at my honesty, because they did not say anything to me for a while, and they eventually told me that I was grounded, but it didn't sound planned. It sounded like something they plucked out of the air in a panic, because they could not think. I was lying in my bed, just feeling drowsy. I didn't want to tell my parents because, I didn't want all of the stress. I was just glad that it was all over. So, I closed my eyes, but about a minute later, I opened them wide, and I felt a horrible wave of dread just come over me. Henry. I had forgotten about Henry. I suddenly felt like everything had become too real, like I couldn't just play it off as a dream or anything anymore. I frantically reached for my cell phone and picked it up, and I did my best to try and call him. It rang, and I had a horrible feeling forming, but thank God he actually eventually picked up. He sounded more messed up than me. I asked him if he was okay, and I just heard him say on the other end, "Don't fucking call me, dude." He sounded like he was fighting back tears, and then he just hung up. I was so focused on the fact that he was alive and that I did not let him die that I didn't even care that he was acting weird. Life went back to normal for a few weeks after that. Well, about as normal as life can possibly be after experiencing something so horrible. I did not mention it to anyone. I don't think that Henry did either. Henry was not showing up at school. I would occasionally get reminded by that horrible night when someone would show the table a video of some doofus in a clown mask. It was clearly some shitty YouTube prankster, and they had paid the couple or whoever they were pranking, but it just kept on flashing me back right to that night. All throughout the school days, I would get this uncontrollable itching around my neck and my shoulders, and when I would go to scratch it, it would make me yelp, and I would feel this slight static shock in my fingernails. Then came the night I was in bed, maybe a month or so after this incident. Nothing was even happening or going on. I was just struggling to get to sleep, and I had drank way too much water, so I got up and I went to the bathroom. I was mid-piss when I all of a sudden just felt my neck lock up and spasm so hard that my head was resting on my right shoulder. I felt all of my muscles go weak and numb just like before, and I could feel that same feeling of electricity spreading up my arms and down my legs. My legs gave up and I ended up down to my knees, all while piss was flying onto the floor and up onto the toilet seat. I could not control it or stop it. I ended up with my pajama pants being soaked, and before long, I felt myself down on the floor, laying on my back in a puddle of piss. And just like that night, I could not move or feel anything. Just like before, One second I was staring up at the ceiling in my bathroom. The next second I was staring up at my bedroom ceiling, and it was like only seconds had passed. I got shouted at by my mom that morning, asking me if I had gotten drunk again and pissed on the floor. That was the very last time it ever happened to me. Henry stopped speaking to me for the rest of the time that we spent in high school, and I eventually got a trade job and moved states because I just did not feel safe anymore. But yeah, that was my experience with the so-called killer clowns back in 2016. I know that you will think I'm lying, and I understand completely why you would not believe me. I know that 99% of the so-called encounters back then were just pranks or publicity stunts, but I bet there's at least another couple of poor souls just like me who had a real encounter. Okay, this one happened to me roughly a year ago or so. I want to say it happened in roughly August or really early September. I just came home from deployment. I bought a used SUV while I was on leave. Then I returned to Fort Drum, NY. I got acquainted with the new privates who were rear guard. I expected to hate all of them, but they were actually pretty chill. We were talking about stuff to do around the area, since there is absolutely nothing in Watertown, NY. The PFC mentions Thompson Park Vortex. I decided to look it up. Something about Watertown's Area 51 and some kind of dimensional portal. Of course, it's all bullshit, but I just thought it would be fun. I grabbed a friend from my battalion's Delta company. I plugged the address into my GPS, and we headed out after work on a Friday. I eventually found a trailhead. The trailhead had a sign on it that said, Thompson Park Vortex, Watertown's Area 51. We took pictures of each other with the sign for Snapchat. Then we headed off on the trail. We brought flashlights. That's really about it, since we did not get off until about 6 p.m. and we knew it was going to be dark. We got through the first clearing, and the darkness was really starting to set in. We kept on walking. We got up to a fork in the trail. It was like 90 degrees. We had the option of going straight on or going right. We decided to go right because we are infantry and we want to go deeper. Worst case scenario, we land nav our way out on GPS. The trail is overgrown but pretty open. There is a left turn into a row of trees. We shine our flashlights down the trail. Out of nowhere, just for a split second, I saw this humanoid form dash across full sprint as soon as we shined the lights down the trail. Like, it was standing there, and then it hopped like a gazelle into a full sprint, so inhumanly fast. I turned to my friend and said, "Hey, did you see that?" "Yeah." "Was that a deer?" "Definitely fucking not, dude." And that's what I thought. "Alright, so, we back up and run, yeah? Sounds good." We ran back to the fork, but we ended up getting lost somehow. I think that we went right, which would have put us in the same spot as whatever we saw, which is mighty, mighty stupid of us. We ended up around a chain link fence area. We followed it back all the way to the parking lot. We had to walk across the entire area just to get to my truck and then leave. And that's my only paranormal encounter. Okay, so this story happened to me when I was around 8 years old. When this happened, I went to a friend's birthday party. But while I was there, I saw this really, really weird kid. When I say weird, I mean incredibly pale, to the point where you could see all of the veins in his skin just running down. He was dressed like a 1920s paperboy for some reason. His clothes looked really old. He was literally wearing a cap, tweed trousers, and a blazer. He had a strange cut/scar on his face. I actually went up to him, and I asked him how it happened. He starts talking about how the kids at his school pushed him on the playground and he fell over. Which, with the way the cut was, it looked more like it was formed with a knife and not just from falling over. He had this incredibly creepy, whispery voice and he spoke like his parents were in the other room, like he was trying not to wake them up. I got increasingly more uncomfortable, and I eventually just walked away. Even though I lived in the exact same town for nearly 5 years, in a similar area to this kid, I never saw him ever again. That was the only time he ever turned up. I tried asking him later and other people about what school he went to and who he knew, and no one really knew. I think my friend, whose party it was, said something about how it was probably some poor kid his mom invited just to be nice. This story is probably boring compared to most of the stuff that gets posted, but for some reason, this experience just really stuck with me. There was something incredibly uncanny about that child. I went to a school with a ton of weird people, and none of them gave the same vibes as he did. He was inhuman.